Welcome to the 2022-2023 Annual ELPS Training. This is a required workshop for educators who serve emergent bilingual students, regardless of the program the student is participating in. So EBs in one-way and two-way dual language, ESL, and our parent denials are all required to be taught the ELPS. Please be sure you have the note-taking guide available for full participation throughout this presentation. You can print out the notes or take digital notes. My personal favorite is the Notability app that allows you to notate any document with your Apple Pencil. The first page of your note-taking guide includes a QR code that links to this presentation. There are also links embedded throughout the presentation that you may want to reference later. Let's review the objectives for our time together. Our content objective is participants will explore and analyze the components of the English Language Proficiency Standards, or ELPS, for providing K-12 instruction commensurate to Emergent Bilingual, or EB, students' needs, linguistic needs. And then our language objective, participants will discuss the implementation of the ELPS based on the linguistic needs of their K-12 emergent bilingual students. All right, so now on your note-taking guide, let's turn to page 2. And which skill do you think is the most challenging to teach and why? Take a minute to rate each language skill from 1, the easiest, to 5, the hardest. And then discuss with the person next to you why you rated them that way. Please pause the video at this time to complete this activity. On page 3 of your note-taking guide, you'll find a space for each section where you can add new learning or important information. These are the 4 sections located in the Texas Administrative Code, Chapter 74.4. It's important to remember that ELPS apply to grade levels K through 12 and all subject areas. They are designed to outline language proficiency levels and student expectations for emergent bilinguals. The ELPS consist of the following sections, as you see in front of you: the introduction, school district responsibilities, cross-curricular second language acquisition, essential knowledge and skills, aka the ELPS, and section D, proficiency level descriptors, aka the PLDs. As you know, in all fields in education, we love our acronyms. So these are a few of the acronyms that you'll find in our presentation today. So ELPS, EBs, PLD, and TELPAS. However, if you click on this title, this links to a whole list of acronyms that are frequently used in multilingual education. So I would print this out. It's one page if you do two-sided, and it could be very helpful, especially for our first-year teachers. This is the first of 4 sections included in Chapter 74.4. In this section, we'll learn what is the purpose of the ELPS as described by the Texas Administrative Code. The first part of Chapter 74.4 talks about the English Language Proficiency Standards and how they outline English language proficiency level descriptors and student expectations for English language learners. Remember, the term English language learner has been updated from ELL to EL, so that's English learner, to EB, that's our current student label for emergent bilingual students. And school districts shall implement this section as an integral part of each subject in the required curriculum. And the ELPS are to be published alongside the TEKS for each subject in the required curriculum. So what does that mean? What does that look like? It means that the TEKS and the ELPS work together to set standards for content and language, respectively. The English Language Proficiency Standards, or ELPS, are to be published along with the TEKS for each subject in the required curriculum, meaning wherever the TEKS are being taught to EBs, the ELPS must also be incorporated. Another part for Section A includes social and academic language proficiency. In order for EBs to be successful, they must acquire both social and academic language proficiency in English. Social language proficiency in English consists of the English needed for daily social interactions. And the academic language proficiency consists of the English needed to think critically, understand and learn new concepts, process complex academic material, interact and communicate in English academic settings, and more. This refers to the difference between the BICS, the basic interpersonal communication skills, versus the CALPS, the cognitive academic language proficiency skills. Take a look at these two pictures on your screen. Which is the BICS and which is the CALPS? How do you know? Turn and talk with a partner. Hopefully you said that the picture on the top left is our basic interpersonal communication skills. And these typically develop in 6 months to 2 years. And then we have the CALPS on the bottom right, which is what our students need to be successful in the classroom. And those typically develop within 5 to 7 years. However, do you notice the little asterisks? That's because 5 to 7 years is the standard timeline for students who are proficient in their native language. So if a student comes to us from another country or speaking another language other than English, and they are not proficient in that first language, they may take up to 10 years to master their second language. And have you heard of the silent period? If so, how long do you think it is? Well, a silent period could be anywhere from 6 months to an entire year. And it's a period of time where students they are taking in information, they are listening, they are learning, but we need to be respectful of their silent period because they're not quite ready to communicate with us yet. And it's very important that we just work on that survival language and really establishing trust and a good relationship before we start forcing a kid to talk. We just continue to model and model until they're finally ready. And when they do, celebrate them like there's no tomorrow. And that way they know with the positive reinforcement that they're on the right track. Okay, so now it's time to test your knowledge. On page 4 of your handout, you will find the same table. The first row is done for you. The commonly used BICS word guess can take different academic forms in different subject areas, such as hypothesis in science, right? So a scientific guess is called a hypothesis. A mathematical guess is an estimate. And then in social studies, you can make a guess with a speculation. So these words, these basic words can take on many different vocabulary in other subjects. So now it's your turn. Try it out. Take the next 3 minutes and try to fill in as many of the missing words as you can. Good luck. All right, everybody, welcome back. So let's reveal some potential responses. Well, how did you do? More importantly than how you did is why is it important to be aware of these connections? Hopefully you said to help students understand what they already know and how it is connected to their new learning. These academic vocabulary words will not be learned simply through exposure. They must be explicitly taught for students to internalize them. So it's not so important that you have all the same words that you see on this screen because there are many different answers. The important thing is that our students know that they do have some foundational knowledge that can transfer, and what they need is that explicit teaching of the academic language in the various subject areas. So as you can see, our language arts teacher won't be teaching the vocabulary of scientific method or hypothesis or density, right? The science teacher is going to have to get those science words in, and in order for students to really learn all the different ways that you can say, make a plan. This is the second of 4 sections included in Chapter 74.4, District Responsibilities. Here you can see Section B sets forth instructional framework. So we have to know our students' proficiency levels and what each level means. We have to linguistically adjust our instruction with the goal of helping the student learn not only the content area, but also English. And then we also have to intervene in intensive ways if we have students who are beginning and intermediate in grades 3 and up, because we know the rigor is significantly increases when students start to get into those testing grades, and it's going to be very hard for them to have that success if they're still beginning or intermediate level. And so the ELPS Linguistic Instructional Alignment Guide provided by TEA allows teachers to see the connections between the ELPS College and Career Readiness Standards, TELPAS proficiency level descriptors, and linguistic accommodations. The integration of these components is critical in lesson planning in order to meet the linguistic needs of our emergent bilingual students. And the LIAG, or the Linguistic Instructional Alignment Guide, is provided for you in the resources section of your handout. There's another tool called the ELPS Instructional Tool, and that can help with the third bullet point here, as it targets beginning and intermediate EBs in grades 3 through 12. Section B, Part 2, talks about linguistically accommodating instruction in a way that is communicated, sequenced, and scaffolded. So in order to linguistically accommodate instruction, educators need to plan for how the information that they're delivering will be communicated, sequenced, and scaffolded. So planning for word comprehensible input, which is the communicated part, allows instruction to be communicated in a way that EBs can understand. And educators must also consider the complexity of information is sequenced from concrete to abstract and simple to complex. Scaffolding instruction involves understanding students' language proficiency levels and what students can do at each stage. And it's also important to remember that these methods can be used in any language of instruction to support language development and content mastery for EBs. For example, under scaffolding, when it talks about structured oral language development, such as sentence frames, when you think about sentence frames, we can use sentence frames in a Spanish instruction time, Vietnamese instruction time, English instruction time, so that we're modeling those structured language in a way that is going to provide that support for our EBs, no matter what the language of instruction is. This is the third of 4 sections included in Chapter 74.4, Section C. This section contains student expectations that specify what students need to learn in order to acquire that second language for academic purposes, and it also includes learning strategies to maximize the progress in the 4 language domains. Effective instruction in second language acquisition involves giving EBs the opportunity to listen, speak, read, and write at their current levels of English development, while gradually increasing the linguistic complexity of the English they read and hear and are expected to speak and write. So here are all the ELPS listed there by domain, and then the top domain is learning strategies. So now that we've looked at all of this information, it's time to do a little short activity. So you're going to use page 5 of your handout to complete the following steps. And you'll spend about 10 minutes completing this activity, maybe a little longer depending on your level of expertise. But step 1 is to pick a T, a learning standard, and an ELPS to marry together for your grade level and content area. And then next, you'll choose a strategy from the menu that goes with the chosen TEKS/ELPS, and then you'll practice writing a content and language objective. So while you're working on this activity, there are some resources here, and these are also located on page 7 of your note-taking guide, but these are some really great resources, and just thinking about those ELPS, right? Like if you need to choose, I'm sure you know where to find your TEKS. If not, then we have a bigger problem. But if you are not sure where to find the ELPS, all the standards are listed here in that last link. And remember, we are looking at section C, right? So cross-curricular second language acquisition, essential knowledge and skills, aka the ELPS. And you'll notice this first section is learning strategies. So right after that first little slash. And then this one is listening, speaking, and reading, and then writing will be last. I personally, obviously we want to focus on all the language domains, but just district wide, we noticed in the TELPAS data from last year that our students really need some help with speaking. So one thing to remember is these ELPS range, or they start, right? This section in particular is A through J. So that means A will be the simplest ELP in this section, and J will be the most complex. So just how with concepts, we want to take our students from simple to complex, with language, we want to take our students from A to J, right? Simple to complex. So finding out where are our students in this continuum using the PLDs, which we'll look at in a minute. And then based on which ELPS you choose, so let's say I'm going to work on 3C, speak using a variety of grammatical structures, sentence lengths, sentence types, and connecting words with increasing accuracy and ease as more English is acquired. So 3C. When I come back over here, I have ELPS interactive language objectives. That's the third bullet point here on the slide of different resources. And here I can come and pick what section. So I want to work on speaking. And then 3C, speak using a variety of sentence structures. There's my there's the beginning of my language objective. So this is really going to help us get started with our language objectives. So speak using a variety of types of sentence stems, about, and then there's where you pull in your content. This is going to help you with your language objective. And I'm sure we have some experts in the room. So again, we'll have about 10 minutes for this activity, and then we'll come back together to finish up the final section. Welcome back. Hopefully you didn't have too much trouble completing that last activity. I know that, we're not able to be there with you getting out in front of 4,000 teachers to deliver this training, but do know that we're always available upon request, me and my team. We'd love to come out and help you. If there was any part of this training or activity that you felt like, oh boy, I wish I had someone from the multilingual programs department here to ask this question, then please feel free to give us a shout out, an email, a phone call. Flag me down if you need me, but we're always happy to help. And my contact information will be included at the end of this presentation, and it's also included in your note-taking guide. We're back to referencing Part A. That's where it refers to Section D. So parts of Chapter 74.4, Section A6 refers to Section D, which are the proficiency level descriptors, often referred to as the PLDs. And these are a key resource for educators to understand the student characteristics of each level within each domain. My favorite aspect of this rubric are the verb tense differences. And we'll look a little closer at this rubric on the next few slides. Section D, the final section of Chapter 74, includes our proficiency level descriptors. So let's look a little closer at the PLDs and how information can transfer to the classroom.
Here's a look at the summary statements for proficiency levels in speaking. As you can see, beginning English language learners still have little or no ability to speak English in academic or social settings. They're just getting started. Students at the intermediate level can speak in a simple manner using commonly heard, routine, academic, and social English. Students who are advanced in speaking have the ability to speak using grade-appropriate English, but they still need some second language acquisition support in both academic and social settings, while advanced high ELLs have the ability to speak grade-appropriate English with only minimal second language support. It's important for all teachers to know the proficiency levels of English language learners in their classes. The needs of a beginning speaker and an advanced high speaker are very different. Let's say you're using a sentence stem to support academic language output and get students participating. An intermediate student benefits from simple sentences with lots of visual support and possibly even a word bank. An advanced or advanced high student really needs to stretch and advance their language. These students benefit from high-level, complex sentence stems and the use of high-level academic language structures. So while it may be appropriate for a student at the beginning level of English proficiency in writing to list, label, and draw to show comprehension, that same level of accommodation isn't so beneficial for students who are working on developing more complex language. If you know your students' proficiency levels in listening, speaking, reading, and writing, you can plan and provide the most appropriate accommodations for each student. Where should the PLDs be used? The PLDs should be used in every content area by every teacher. They're not just for the ESL specialist. Students need appropriate scaffolding and accommodations in every
subject, right? So just keeping that in mind, let's zoom out a little bit and look at this information. So this chart shows the composite proficiency levels for all 20,500 emergent bilingual students in Garland ISD. And individual, like we just heard in this video, individual language proficiency levels vary greatly from one student to the next. And our emergent bilingual students are diverse in many ways, including language and cultural heritage, as well as levels of language proficiency. Two groups in particular that I want to talk about are newcomers and our long-term EB students, because these are two still diverse populations with distinct needs and strengths. It's important to know that only 5% of our Garland ISD emergent bilingual students were born outside the USA. That means the other 95% are right here from America. And even less than that 5% are still classified as immigrant and have been here less than 3 years, or 3 years or less. The majority of our EBs, like I just said, were born here and are actually long-term. So more than 11,000 of our 20,000, or about 55%, are long-term. And these students have not just were born here, but they've been in US schools for at least 5 years and have not met the criteria to reclassify as English proficient. So I would be remiss if I did not mention reclassification. And so it's just remember, every year TA is going to come out with the reclassification rubric. In all the time that I've been in education, there's been some changes, but one thing that's remained the same is EBs are eligible for reclassification starting at the end of first grade. And so that means early monitoring is really essential for students who are accelerating in their language progress and have reached advanced high in all domains of TELPAS, in addition to the other reclassification criteria. So keeping all this in mind, this is why it is critical to be cognizant of your EB student backgrounds. It's not good enough to know who is an EB and who's not. We must know who each of our EBs are. Some great starting points to look at are their home language, their country of origin, and their years in US schools. I would definitely know those things for every EB in my classroom, and then start digging deeper. Section D contains those proficiency level descriptors, right, that describe how well students communicate in English at each stage of acquisition or proficiency level. And the 4 proficiency levels are described for each domain. So for listening, speaking, reading, and writing. They each have beginning, intermediate, advanced, and advanced high, each of your students. And these domains do not develop sequentially. And so they could be, one of your students could be accelerating in one domain quicker than they are in the other ones, and vice versa. So using page 6 of your note-taking guide, take a few minutes to map out your students by language proficiency level in each domain. And all information for your students can be found in Elevation. And for my secondary peeps, if you teach several sections, I would recommend beginning with the section that has the most EBs, and you can complete the other sections at a later time. So it's time to pause the video and map out your kiddos. Welcome back. Now that you know the proficiency levels for each of your students, it's also important to know what those proficiency levels mean. What do they look like? And so when you're looking at the different rubrics, it's important to pay attention to the grade levels associated with each rubric. For reading and writing, there are separate rubrics for K1 and 212, but the listening and speaking rubrics are applicable to all grade levels K through 12. And if you notice, I haven't said pre-K because pre-K is not included in the PLDs, and pre-K students are not required to take the TELPAS. However, it is critical that they are growing in their language development whenever they're with us in Garland ISD. And so we identify students in pre-K as emergent bilingual, and we do serve those students. And we do measure linguistic proficiency for all pre-K students identified as emergent bilingual at the beginning of the year and at the end of the year. And so at the beginning of the year, we use the same assessments called PLDs, and that measures the linguistic progress of our pre-K EB students. So at this time, just take a minute and take a look at some of the differences in these rubrics. Specifically, I want you to look for the verbs and the differences between the verbs that you see from beginning, intermediate, and advanced. And one thing that I've noticed in trying to pick up patterns in these different domains and different categories is that our beginning students, they really, I think that's the easy one, right? Beginning is really, you can tell when a kid is beginning, right? The hardest is between intermediate and advanced, because between beginning and intermediate, you'll notice beginning, they're going to attempt, they may or may not attempt some simple present tense. It may even come across as like memorized, right? They memorize these things. And so that's why they're able to use them, right? I probably would sound like I knew what I was talking about in Japanese until you asked me to say more than what I have memorized. And so I'm definitely beginning in my second or third language. And then moving on to intermediate, now the students are attempting the present tense, and they're pretty successful at present tense, pretty consistent at present tense. And if at all they attempt past or future, it's going to probably be incorrect. Then you move on to the advanced domain. And so in the advanced level, you'll notice they're using past, present, and future simple tenses correctly. But when they attempt to use more complex or compound, like subjunctive or conditional verbs and tenses, that they're not really able to use those consistently with accuracy. And then you move on to advanced high, right, where you are comparable to your native English speaking peers. And, you know, when you read their writing, it doesn't seem a whole lot different, but still, they will still need minimal support. So advanced high doesn't mean that they're perfect in English. They will never be perfect in English. It will always be their second language. You know, I'm advanced high in Spanish, but I still make mistakes, right? And so that's just something to also keep in mind. Take a few minutes and explore the PLDs. And in order to get to the PLDs, they are right here linked on this fourth bullet point. So you'll see they have them for each language domain. and grade levels if they had different rubrics for different grade levels. All right, welcome back. I hope you enjoyed exploring the PLDs a little bit and matching them up. Maybe you're making some connections between what you're seeing in the classroom with your students and how they're performing and their proficiency levels. And so these are some of the resources that were talked about and mentioned today during the training. And they're also linked in your note-taking guide on page 7 for future reference. So let's review. Our content objective was participants will explore and analyze the components of the English language proficiency standards for providing K-12 instruction commensurate to emergent bilingual students' linguistic needs. And our language objectives is participants will discuss the implementation of the ELPS based on the linguistic needs of their K-12 language learners. I appreciate your time, your attention. If you have any questions, feel free to contact me. My name is Tara Sals. I'm the director for the Department of Multilingual Programs, and my email address is there on the screen. And also, please follow us. We're on Twitter and Instagram at GISD, the number 4 EB with the S at the end. Thanks so much for tuning in and have a great day.